This is Unit 4, Lesson 1 that we're right in today. So you're looking for the tasks to complete for U4L1. You can find it under assignments or on the weekly calendar on the Canvas homepage. What I chiefly did over the break, and what a lot of you noticed, was I got caught up on grading. Sorry I was so far behind, but I have now graded all assignments, all tests. And so what I'd like to dedicate a little bit of class time to is getting you to review that, take a look at your grades, take a look at your tests, and there's a little reflection that I would like you to complete. So on the tasks to complete list, we are now on step 3. And so please open up the Science2A January 2021 grades reflection Google form, and then open up your grades on Canvas. You should be able to see everything. And I'm just going to time for 15 minutes for you to work through the Google form and answer the questions. We'll come back together when it looks like a majority of you are done. Let me know if you have questions or if you can't figure something out. Go for it. Let's check in. All right, hope that was helpful. And it's always just good for you to know that you have that resource there. You can always check on grades, and I'm going to do my resolve to do a better job this month of keeping the grade book updated as we go. Please check in with me if you ever need help on any assignment, if you need an extra copy of something, if you're not sure what's going on, or if I mess something up. Please let me know and I can update it. You can still get credit for any missing work. So I'm here to help you with that. And yes, definitely please prioritize labs and activities. If you're missing those have a big impact. Looking over the results as you were working, it looks like most of you are feeling good. So, all right, welcome to a new unit. Our next task is just to introduce that. So I'm going to title this unit for Atmosphere in Humans. We're going to dive into climate change, talk about carbon footprint, and analyze the data. You guys took that survey on back in September. We might play a little carbon cycle game. I don't know if we'll get to that. We're going to dive into a little bit of human anatomy and physiology with the circulatory and respiratory systems. You are going to need to get balloons at some point. And so that's just something to put on your little checklist next time you go shopping. If you could just buy little rubber party balloons, you're going to need those for laboratory further down the road. So that's a good thing to get. And we're hopefully going to end with a little environmental debate project. We're going to focus on what's called Red Gold. It's a documentary about the conflict between the salmon fishing industry and the mining industry in Alaska, and still something that's kind of actually ongoing. And that might actually be our final exam, is to prepare a presentation based on that and debate about it. And so you can see all this outlined on our Canvas homepage as well on the calendar. If you scroll down to Unit 4, I kind of tried to take my best guess on that. And you can see that we also have our final exam week, but again, we'll be doing a kind of a debate then. That'll be right at the end of January and the start of February. So any questions on this unit and what's coming up? All right. Well, if we're going to start talking about global warming, then I want to do a quick formative assessment probe to see how you feel right now. We have touched on it a little bit, but on the tasks to complete list, step number 5, there's another formative assessment probe called global warming that I'd like you to complete. As usual, this is graded for completion, not for correctness. So you don't need to look anything up. You don't need to refer to your notes. Just take your best guess and explain your reasoning, right? I'm going to time for 10 minutes, but once again, once I see that most people have this done, we'll come back together. So 10 minutes to work on step number 5, global warming formative assessment probe. Let me know if you need help. This is a recording here. So let me drag this over. So according to this, it looks like, yep. So most votes went to Natalie and Tessa, which is awesome. So you guys definitely have a good understanding that it is a result of carbon dioxide, chiefly being released by, as Natalie says, burning coal. And as Tessa says, the fuel we use in our cars. Both of those are major contributors of CO2 in the atmosphere. Next person who got the most votes was Raul, who was stating the thinning of the Earth's ozone layer, which is a very common misconception. It is definitely a problem, but the thinning of the ozone layer relates a little bit more to our exposure to UV light and damaging human skin. That's why that's a big problem, and it's also just not good for plants. Plants are being overexposed to UV radiation, not necessarily warmth directly. So the ozone layer, don't think of the ozone layer as directly relating to global warming. It's definitely more what's called the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, and a couple other things we'll learn about, methane, even water vapor, that are coming from burning coal and fossil fuels. Very good. Any comments on that? All right, then let's take a look at some kind of scary data here. I have a link to this website. This is now step number 6. Our World in Data, if you haven't checked this website out before, is really awesome. They've got data about pretty much everything you can imagine here. But what I want to focus on is the CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. And so we can look at different countries and how countries are trying to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide being produced, right? You all took that carbon footprint survey, which is kind of tracking your personal contribution to the overall carbon release based on transport, home use, that kind of thing. We're going to analyze that in our next class meeting. But just to take a comparison, let's take a look at the United States, which has kind of recently left the Paris Agreement and Accords. And so mixed results, but still we have had a kind of a drop. We're kind of back to, I mean, this is as of 2017, back more to like where we were in the 1960s, which is kind of interesting. And that's per capita use. Overall, though, as you can see, we've had a big spike in carbon emissions and a slight reduction now that there's certain regulations that have been put in place. So let's compare that now. If we go back to a country like Sweden, take a look at Sweden. Actually, let's look at France. Let's take a look at France over here. Now, granted, they're a much smaller country, so it's going to be a hard comparison. But here you can see the per capita emissions, again, much lower than where the US is. Kind of interesting, though, that they are also back to where they were in like 1955, 1960. That's kind of interesting that that's consistent. But you can see not as significant a drop as I thought. But you can see the European countries are definitely putting a little bit more effort into dropping carbon emissions than outside of Europe currently. The Paris Climate Accords was kind of a big movement there. So why is reducing carbon dioxide such a big deal? Well, again, you can kind of see that average global temperatures have been steadily rising. This is a graph many of you have probably seen, and there's definitely a correlation between these global rising temperatures and the increase in carbon dioxide emissions. And there's also a lot of chemistry behind the fact that these gases are trapping heat in our atmosphere. The graph that really scares me, this is another good one, just showing where the anomalies in average temperature are. And as you can see, we're definitely, it's not evenly distributed, where a lot of the warming is occurring, right? Which is like an increase of up to 4 to 7 degrees Celsius, which is crazy, is happening in the northern and southern parts of our planet. So the ice caps are melting, that kind of thing. But you can also look at things like Australia, which if anyone was following the news at the start of this year, 2020, Australia was on fire entirely, and a big contributor to that was these ridiculously high temperatures. But this is the graph that really gets me. So this is atmospheric CO2 concentrations going as far back as 803,719 BCE, which I'm sure a lot of you are saying, well, then how the heck do we know that? No one was monitoring carbon dioxide emissions then, but they study bubbles trapped in ice. So as these ice caps are melting, scientists have actually been able to go out and they've been able to capture these gas bubbles that have been trapped in ice for hundreds of millions of years, and are able to analyze the CO2 content in that air. So it's been kind of interesting to get this data. They're also studying rocks and deposits, that kind of thing. But look at where we are currently. That really blows my mind that we are completely off the charts in terms of CO2 emissions. And so there's some kind of balance that's off here. And so this is kind of why there's been such an obsession with global warming and climate change recently. Anyway, there's a bunch of other interesting graphs on this website you're welcome to check out. But that's what I want to explore, is what's going on with those carbon emission levels, and how can we kind of combat against it. So I'll show you just 2 videos here really quick that kind of inspire me, and I found informative about global warming. So this first one is from a movie called An Inconvenient Truth, came out a while ago. Al Gore kind of talking about climate change.
global warming, or none like it hot. You're probably wondering why your ice cream went away. Well, Susie, the culprit isn't foreigners, it's global warming.
Global Wapu?